My name's Steve Lewin and I'm the director of the WITS Business School, and it really gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here this evening to what promises to be a very interesting and entertaining lecture by esteemed guest and the panel, and hopefully, as is the case with these kinds of presentations, a lot of input and debate from the floor. So allow me to extend a special welcome to our guest of honor, Professor Dominick Salvatore from Fordham University, New York. Discussions such as these go hand in hand with one of the key thrusts of the business school, which is to participate in matters of national interest, or as it turns out in this case, on the interests of Africa as a whole.
We are looking at capitalism or markets primarily. The primary function is for growth. We know the problems of many nations, including South Africa, that growth is inadequate. The potential growth of South Africa is twice, 3 times the actual realized growth. The question is why, and that's where the markets come and the comparison with China come. Now, we are interested in capitalism because we are interested in growth, and there is no general theory of growth, but we know all of the ingredients from past experience. What are the characteristics of countries that are rapidly growing? And then we will see that one of the characteristics is openness, which is part of the market, and then a market economy, ease of doing business. So in other words, growth depends on some specific characteristics, and we will see what they are and where is Africa in general and South Africa in particular in satisfying those characteristics. South Africa has that potential, has those structural characteristics which are adequate. We should improve on them in order to be able to grow faster. But there is something bad on the horizon. Growth is declining everywhere. So that now the process of having a rapid growth in South Africa becomes in a sense more difficult than otherwise, because there is something happening in the world where every country is growing less than in the past. First of all, it's not capitalism versus communism, if you want to call it that. I'm an economist, not a politician. We want a market economy. Capitalism is like the Wild West, without any rules. We want capitalism, but with a human face, with human values introduced, and that means a market economy well regulated, rather than wild capitalism. And these are not my data. This is the World Bank data, measured in any way, purchasing power, non-purchasing power. Russia, 148 million, produced less goods and services, and therefore standard of living, than little Netherlands, 14 million people. Now, why the topic was chosen, I presume, because we have to choose between a market economy and growth, and as we will see, non-market economy and no growth. The advanced countries are growing and expected to grow more slowly than emerging markets. And among the emerging markets, there is developing Asia, primarily China there in the weight of the data, and then there is sub-Saharan Africa, growing about 6%, or expected to grow. 6% is a very high rate of growth. It means that in real terms, the GDP of the standard of living will double in 12 years. That's a rapid rate of growth, because this is in real terms, not taking inflation into account. International economics has these laws. Development economics does not have a law exactly saying a law of how to grow. So we have to take a step back to see what are the characteristics of the fastest growing economies in the world. We want to learn how they grew rapidly, because we want to see how we can grow rapidly. No non-market economy was ever rich. China, no one forced China to open up. No one. China deliberately opened up, because without opening, China did not have the technology, did not have the capital, did not have the markets that made it possible for it to grow so spectacularly. So China, in a sense, is a dual economy, where the economy is closer to a market economy or wild capitalism. You can get away with a lot of things that you cannot and you should not. And I always tell China, when you go abroad, I don't mention South Africa for delicacy, but when you go abroad, understand that you are a guest. Don't come and tell me we have to not abide by the rules. You are in a foreign country, you are the guest. And why do you get annoyed at me when I say this? In order to go to China, what do you need to do? You have to have joint ventures. So you should understand that. What's good for you, it's good for others. No countries would like to have all of its banks, all of its industries and mines owned by foreigners. China already owns your textile industry and Nigeria's textile industry. What would they want? To own also the mines, the banks, and the industries? No country wants that, and they have to understand it. In fact, we know perfectly well how the thing works. No superhumans or no super. To come into China, you have to have joint ventures. You have to teach me everything. Then we set up a parallel in the firm, which drives the joint ventures out of business. So now people say, well, they also lose. No, first they had 0, then they have 50%, and now they have 100%. And you say, well, why can they do it and why can we not do it? The reason is because they have such a huge economy and everybody would like to go there. South Africa is a big country, but no country is like China, and therefore everybody wants to go there. That gives them some bargaining power that other nations do not have. South Africa, on each of these, stands better than many emerging markets. South Africa is a rule of law. There are regulations which are appropriate. South Africa falls short in other sectors, and we have to know. I see, if I came here and said, in order to grow faster, you have to invest more, who could be against that? But that's not saying anything. You have to say how much more and where and how to invest. Otherwise, you are saying nothing. You are saying platitudes which are true but have no use. The more international competitiveness, the greater the growth in per capita income or the level of per capita income. Notice it is a powerful relationship, not a straight line, it's exponential. In other words, if you increase a little international competitiveness when you are out of here, your per capita income or growth will shoot up. Where is South Africa in this? This is where South Africa is. It's right here. So now, if at this index of international competitiveness, which goes from 0 to 7, 0, you're not competitive at all. 7, you are the most competitive economy in the world. South Africa has an index of 4.3. Notice, if South Africa had an index of 5.3, it would be here. In other words, it's not that, yes, in the process of having more openness, more market economy, this in general stimulates growth. Korea has not much natural resources at all. South Africa has more natural resources than most other countries. So Korea with nothing, starting much lower than South Africa. Not everybody can be Korea. Fine. But they did it, they saved, they invested in education, in training, and you don't even have to have a democratic government the way that Britain had, the United States has or had. You need a government that is responsive to people. A government which shows support of the people, government who does things to help people. I'm very confident that with the rule of law, the Constitution, and that South Africa has, and the understanding of people being tired of crime and corruption, the governments will have to respond more and more to these things and doing the things for which they are there. So every 7 workers who, instead of working 40 hours a week, work 35 hours a week, they will save, in a sense, 35 hours so that they could create 1 more job. I said, well, if that were true, then why don't we go from 40 hours, not to 35, to 30 hours? We'll create even more jobs. Why don't we go from 40 to 25? We have full employment. We resolve the problem. Because implicitly they were saying that they wanted to go from 40 to 35 hours a week with the same weekly wage, which meant that the wage per hour increased. And in economics, we don't have the hypothesis of demand. We don't have the theory of demand. We have the law of demand, that when something increases in price, we buy less of it. So now, if you do this, what did firms do? Instead of hiring more workers, they substituted capital for labor because labor became too expensive. So now, you can increase wages, but the increase in wage must be depending upon increases in productivity. So if your productivity increases 10%, you can increase wages by 10%, and the unit cost of labor remains the same. Otherwise, it's self-defeating. Globalization is the most anti-inflationary policy the world has ever seen. A firm increases prices, they lose markets. You are a worker, demand wage increases in excess of productivity, firms relocate elsewhere. You can only get the wage that you earn in productivity. So notice, how can we grow faster? By improving international competitiveness. How can we improve international competitiveness? By being more open, more globalized, protecting certain industries, we say always with the appropriate, and so on. So now, look at growth rates. Look at growth rates in China. Now it's coming down. And I have to say this, if someone had said to you 3 years ago that the growth rate of China, which has been 10%, would be 7%, you would be shocked or almost unbelieving. And I am telling you that within 3 years, the growth rate of China will go down less than 5%. It's not that we are happy. You know, we don't gain any benefit by the misfortunes of countries, but that's the realism. So we'll see why. Data do not speak for themselves. China needs, at least for China, a growth rate of 7% is like Germany 1%. Because China still has 300-400 million people who live in subsistence agriculture, and it takes 4 or 5 percentage points of growth to transfer those people out of subsistence agriculture. And the Chinese government knows this, knows that if the growth rate goes too much below 6%, they may be in trouble. South Africa does extremely well on education. In expenditures, it spends more as a percentage of GDP than any other emerging market. Somehow, however, South Africa doesn't get the full benefit of these great expenditures. So the question is, we have to go upstream to see why. Are the teachers not good? Are the students see their older brothers and sisters who graduate, have a college degree and don't find jobs, and so they have no interest in learning? And of course, there are specialists who could do this, very great specialists who know how, or they look in detail where the problem lies and how to improve. So we know that South Africa is at the edge in crime and corruption, and that's one thing. And how do you overcome? By the sensitivity of people, of the electorate for government, and the government is unnoticed. They know, even if they win election, they know that for the next time around, people will keep them to see what have you done for the people, because that's the reason why you are there. We are really facing a major problem, and at the American Economic Association, I had the greatest experts on growth. And it seems like somehow, even though we see a lot of innovations happening, they are not the dramatic innovations like the laptop, like electricity before. In other words, these are 3/4 of the increase in the standard of living of people comes from innovations and new technologies. Somehow it seems that we are slowing down. The whole world is slowing down. This is the average growth between 1995 per year to 1913 to 2013. Look at the growth rate, and the expectation is that it will decline. In Europe, it will decline. In Japan, in China, look at this. Now, they could be wrong, but that's what. But these were in the past. The same predictions were fairly close to the point, to the mark. So now, what we are saying and concluding is that South Africa has the potential to grow at 5-6% per year, and it's growing 1/3. So, how can South Africa? We have to go more in detail to look at all the ways in which it falls short of those indices that are the common characteristics of growth, but growth in a context when everyone is slowing growth, that's bad, because the general tendency in any event is to grow slower. But the rich countries are already rich. You see, there is such thing as a convergence hypothesis. It's very easy to grow at the very beginning very fast. But inevitably, when you have copied everything and so on, now you have to develop your own technology. Korea grew rapidly. Japan grew rapidly. China is growing rapidly. But China reached a peak. And now it's beginning to come down in growth. Now is the time for the emerging markets who are poorer to take advantage of globalization and the markets to grow fast, with good regulations. I'm not saying you have to have completely free trade. There is a rule that if you are a developing country, you can protect some infant industries in which you could become efficient, but you cannot compete with the advanced countries now. So, the rule of the World Trade Organization allow you to protect some infant industries with the understanding that once you have become efficient, so it's not that globalization means complete open trade. It means that if there are sectors in which you become efficient, you are allowed to protect and give subsidies temporarily until you can achieve those efficiencies. I'll stop here. Thank you very much for